don't think there's any greater tragedy than one in which you know a person could end up living their life happily, but by their own actions they don't. And by those standards, I think that today's manga could very well be the most tragic thing ever put to print.
At some point in every person's life, we become dissatisfied with how we're seen by other people. Whether it's due to unrequited love, or being unable to make amends with somebody we've pissed off, or wanting to be accepted into a social group, everyone goes through this to some degree at some point in their life. But it tends to be a very common plight for teenagers, who are in that awkward phase where they become burdened with some of the problems of adulthood, but have yet to learn any of the ways to deal with those problems. So, for example, suddenly these young people have to learn how to meet and communicate with people in an entirely new way, and often without being shown how to do so. Some teens overcome the challenge easily and go and have very active social lives in middle and high school, but some are intimidated and overwhelmed by the challenge, and have a lot of difficulty making friends. This is a manga that deals with that issue, titled... well, how the hell am I supposed to pronounce that?
私が持ってないのはどう考えてもお前らが悪い.
The manga, known by the abbreviation Watamote, as well as the English translation It's Not My Fault That I'm Not Popular, follows the high school life of a girl named Kuroki Tomoko. Tomoko is incredibly introverted to the point she has difficulty speaking to anyone outside of her own family. In spite of barely being able to exchange a single sentence with her peers or even her teacher, Tomoko dreams of one day being popular, attractive, and surrounded by adoring friends at all times. There's not much of a plot beyond that simple premise. The entire series is just a look into the daily life of this awkward, shy girl and her bizarre way of looking at the world.
What separates Tomoko from so many other generic shy girl characters out there is just how absolutely blunt the series is in its portrayal of her. Her shyness is not supposed to be cute, it's supposed to be awkward and unsettling, and she's not some beautiful flower that just needs to bloom. She's actually really creepy looking and sort of ugly.
At the same time, it's very easy to empathize with Tomoko. Here's this poor girl who's been told by every form of media she's encountered that everyone's got super active social lives in high school, but then when she gets in high school, it's not like that for her, and seemingly only for her. Even you, that being you, Tomoko's best friend from middle school, who used to be just as plain and socially awkward as Tomoko, has grown to this pretty, popular girl who even has a boyfriend. And that's really the brilliant thing about It's Not My Fault That I'm Not Popular. The creative duo behind the series, Tanigawa Nico, is not afraid to pull punches in how they portray their main character as this weird, ugly shut-in, but it's clear that they want you, that's you, the reader, to be on Tomoko's side. And that's not really all that difficult, because feeling depressed and alone is something that everyone can relate to.
In fact, Tomoko's situation might be too easy to relate to. Some people have dropped reading the series because it just hits too close to home for them.
Your capacity for enjoying the series will probably have less to do with your ability to relate to Tomoko, because, like I said, I think that everyone can relate to her, and more to do with whether or not the manga can make you laugh. As depressing as the premise may sound, and despite the fact that I opened this video describing it as a tragedy, this is actually a slice-of-life comedy series, with most of the jokes coming from how bizarrely Tomoko acts and thinks. For example, one chapter revolves around her thinking that a bunch of guys are hitting on her, when in reality they're helpfully pointing out that she's covered in ants! However, at the same time, I can't really say if you'll appreciate the manga's sense of humor or not.
You see, you're supposed to sympathize with Tomoko, but all the jokes come at her expense, so any given chapter stands just as good a chance of making you cringe as making you laugh.
I found it easier to laugh at the bits that had more to do with Tomoko's hobbies than with her lack of popularity. I guess I just didn't feel so bad about laughing at her inserting her own voice into perverted video games, or thinking that masturbation will make her look more attractive, because those are things worth getting embarrassed over, as opposed to getting depressed over. Your mom stumbles into your room and finds out you've been recording your own erotic voiceovers? That's embarrassing, sure. But getting caught cheating a bunch of 6-year-olds at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Knockoff because you're desperate to impress your little cousin? Man, that's just sad. And even worse are the chapters that make it seem that the universe is conspiring to make Tomoko miserable.
There's a fairly recent chapter in which Tomoko thinks about forming her own school club. And I won't spoil the ending for you, but when I read it, it absolutely broke my heart.
The saddest thing about the series is the sense that it'll take a very long time for Tomoko to get out of this rut she's in, and I think that's because of how genuine the manga feels. Tomoko doesn't come across as unrealistically good or bad. She seems like she could be a real girl who really is going through this unfortunate situation. And the solution from the get-go is so obvious. There are a few cases where we see firsthand that people do care about Tomoko, regardless of how awkward she is, and even treat her with kindness, but she remains completely oblivious to this. Tomoko just needs to get up the courage to put herself out there, start talking to people, and she'll make friends naturally. But at the same time, Tanigawa's writing shows us that that's so much easier said than done, because even when people do notice Tomoko and try to engage her in conversation, she can barely talk back to them because she's so nervous and she has no idea what to say. There are even times when she goes out of her way to avoid her classmates, even when she wants to make friends, because being alone feels so much safer to her.
And that's real. People do act that way. And I feel like this is a manga that every teenager and every person who has to regularly deal with teenagers should read. Even if they don't like it, even if they don't laugh at it, even if they don't read manga in general, usually, they should read this, even if it's for only a couple of chapters, because some point in their lives, probably very soon, they will encounter somebody similar to Tomoko.
Despite being a pretty polarizing series, it's not my fault that I'm Not Popular has gained a very devoted underground following. The manga gets passed around on a number of English websites, especially image boards, and Tomoko herself has gained mimetic status. A lot of fans have bought the first 2 collected volumes even if they can't read Japanese, purely for the sake of supporting the manga. If you do happen to be able to read Japanese, the manga is available for free on Gangan Comics Online. You don't even need a subscription to read it. But to read in English, you'll have to go with fan translations. The series has yet to be licensed, but it's barely over a year old, so hope still remains.
I'm Y Ruler of Time, and I hope that you don't spend this holiday season feeling lonely, and that you forget what they taught you in school. Always read right to left.